show you how I make a cabbage. I use a yarn that's really thin on one side and then flat on the other side. I believe this type of yarn is most often called a ribbon yarn. And then if you see, the fibers are actually more of a felt than a spun yarn, and it's sewn down the middle. So what I like to do is start off with the outside part. So I take my end and I put it over, and then this yarn is actually going to wrap around inside of here. And you can, the other way you can make it is start off in the middle and just do a roll. So that works too, but I think through, I don't know, trial and error, that I ended up just really liking the results of doing it this way. So what I'm gonna do, I use a really light fingering weight yarn, and I like the results of this a lot more than using thread, because yarn is very sticky on yarn. So I'm gonna just do a stitch or two. I'm gonna leave a bit of an end. Alright, now here comes the fun part. You're going to take this and you're going to smush it inside. Have it go around, and once you've gotten to the point where you think it's really full, then cut the ribbon yarn, but cut it so that you have a little bit of extra to tuck it in. Alright, so here we are. It's gonna, you could choose this side or you could choose this side. I really like this side. So what I'm gonna do now is take my needle and I'm gonna sew, my thread's coming out here by the way. I'm gonna sew across, and what I'm gonna try to do is sew across here, but in the middle as much as I can. So have my needle go across and all the way to the other side. Now I'm gonna pull my thread so that, might be hard to see, but the thread is hidden a bit. And it's also going to give this a bit more dimension, but I'm not going to pull my thread a lot. So then what I'm going to do is put it back in here and come out, let's say here. And again, don't pull too hard, but pull a bit. Then I'm going to take my thread, and again I'm going to try to sew this in the middle. Come out here. See the shape it's taking. I'm going to do this again. Alright, so I'm finished for now. That's my cabbage. So I've decided to take the cabbage that I just made and sew it onto this square. So what I do is I take the cabbage and I put it in the middle of the square exactly where I want it, and I hold it down with my thumb. I take where the thread's coming out, and typically this is my longest thread with the needle on it, and this thread's coming out of the middle, so I'm actually just gonna sew it down into the actual garden. So just take the needle and put it down in there. And then what I'm going to do is actually come back up at another space, which might be, let's say, 1/4 of an inch over. Come back up, and again, I'm just going to put the needle into the fabric. It's going to come out. Alright, I'm going to just keep doing that all the way around. Come up through the middle of the cabbage and then go down where the blanket is. And then again, come up to the middle and go down where the blanket is. So what I do next is I feel all around the cabbage to see if there's a spot where it seems that it really wants to come up, and right here I would say really wants to come up. So I'm going to come up through there and then again I'm going to go down. Alright, so now this is one of the craziest things I do. I flip it over, and I know that my cabbage is around here. One of the reasons why that's obvious is because I can see all the sewn threads. So what I actually do is I take my needle, and I really want to sew into the cabbage. However, I don't really want my thread to be seen. So I'm going to guesstimate and take my needle and definitely dive into the cabbage, but not a whole lot, so that my thread isn't seen. So I'm going to do that. I believe I just went from here to here. I'm going to go back and maybe come up here. Do this again. Now you can weave in your ends if you want. Actually traditionally weave them in, or you can just sew it back and forth into the yarn a little bit. But I don't think you have to do this very much because you've already just done a whole lot of sewing, so which meaning going back and forth and into the cabbage, that's enough for your yarn to not want to pull out. Alright, so now I'm just going to take my thread and I'm going to cut about 1 inch or 2. And this is just a knitting tip, that if you cut your thread about 1 inch or 2 away from where it's coming out, that it's never going to pop out into the other side. Alright, so what are we going to do with this other thread? Well, this other thread is pretty easy. Just thread it onto my needle. Alright, so I'm going to take it. First I'm just going to sew it directly down to where it's coming out. And then I might, this part right here is a little bulky. I don't know if you see that, but this part. So I think I'm going to come up through there. And sew this part down a little bit. So there's my cabbage. Alright, so then I'm going to flip this over, and again, I'm just going to go back and forth a little bit. Alright, there we go. And now we have a finished cabbage.